Millionaire couldn't sleep for 15 years until he meet his maid. The reason will make you cry. For 15 years, tech millionaire Adrian had suffered from chronic insomnia that no doctor could cure, until Naomi, his night shift home care nurse, discovered the heartbreaking reason behind his sleepless nights. When Adrian revealed the traumatic secret he'd been carrying since he was 12 years old, Naomi realized that healing sometimes requires more than medicine. It requires the courage to face buried pain and the love of someone who refuses to give up on you. Their journey from professional caregiver and patient to something deeper would prove that the most powerful healing happens when broken souls find each other in the darkness. Get ready for a story that will leave you speechless and make you believe in the power of destiny. Stay with me until the very end, because this story will restore your faith in humanity. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and comment your thoughts throughout the story. Your engagement helps us bring you more incredible narratives. The grandfather clock in Adrian's mansion struck 3 a.m., marking another sleepless hour in a life that had been defined by insomnia for 15 years. At 35, Adrian had built a tech empire worth $200 million, but all his success felt meaningless when he couldn't experience the basic human need for rest that others took for granted. Mr. Adrian, called the gentle voice of his newest night shift nurse, Naomi Williams, as she entered his bedroom with the herbal tea and medication routine that had become as familiar as breathing. "How are you feeling tonight?" "The same as every night for the past 15 years, Adrian replied, not bothering to hide the exhaustion that had become his permanent state. "Wide awake, tired, and wondering if I'll ever sleep normally again." At 28, Naomi had worked as a private care nurse for 3 years, but she'd never encountered a case quite like Adrian's. His medical file read like a catalog of every sleep disorder treatment available: medications, therapy, sleep studies, meditation retreats, acupuncture, all unsuccessful. "Have you tried the breathing exercises Dr. Martinez recommended?" she asked, settling into the comfortable chair beside his bed that had been positioned there specifically for the night nurses who monitored his condition. "I've tried everything, Naomi. 15 years of specialists, and nobody can figure out why a 12-year-old boy suddenly stopped sleeping and never started again." "You were 12 when the insomnia began." "July 15th, 2008. I remember the exact date because it was the night everything changed." Naomi noted the specific date and the way Adrian's expression shifted when he mentioned it. In her experience, trauma-related insomnia often began with a specific triggering event, but Adrian's file contained no mention of childhood trauma. "What happened on July 15th, 2008? Adrian was quiet for so long that Naomi thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a secret he'd been carrying for over 2 decades. "That was the night I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you most." The cryptic response raised more questions than it answered, but Naomi recognized the signs of someone who had never properly processed a traumatic experience. "Adrian, have you ever talked to anyone about what happened that night?" "You mean besides the parade of therapists my parents hired to fix my sleep problem?" "No, I've never talked about it." "What did you tell the therapists?" "I told them I couldn't sleep. They assumed it was stress from school or adolescent anxiety. Nobody asked the right questions, and I was too scared to volunteer information." "Scared of what?" "Scared of not being believed, scared of making things worse, scared of admitting that what happened actually happened." Naomi felt her heart rate increase as she recognized the pattern of someone who had experienced childhood trauma that remained unprocessed and unresolved. "Adrian, I need to ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you're not comfortable." "What?" "Were you hurt by someone you trusted?" The question hung in the air between them, and Naomi watched as Adrian's composed mask cracked slightly, revealing the 12-year-old boy who had never felt safe enough to sleep. "Yes," he whispered, "by someone my family trusted completely." And you've never told anyone about it. How do you tell people that the person who taught you to ride a bike and helped with homework also? He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Adrian, you don't have to say anything more tonight, but I want you to know that whatever happened to you wasn't your fault, and keeping it secret is probably why your body refuses to let you sleep. What do you mean? Your mind is trying to protect you by staying hypervigilant. Sleep feels unsafe because sleep means being vulnerable, and vulnerability led to being hurt. Adrian stared at Naomi with amazement. In 15 years of medical consultations, no one had ever connected his insomnia to trauma responses and survival instincts. You think my brain is keeping me awake on purpose? I think your 12-year-old mind made a decision that staying awake was safer than sleeping, and your adult brain never got the message that the danger passed. But the danger didn't pass. It went on for 3 years. The admission escaped before Adrian could stop it, and Naomi felt her heart break as she understood that he'd endured prolonged trauma during critical developmental years. Adrian, what you experienced sounds like it was sustained abuse over multiple years. No child should have to endure that, and no adult should have to carry those memories alone. But I did carry them alone. For 23 years, I've carried them alone. You don't have to carry them alone anymore. What do you mean? I mean that healing from childhood trauma is possible, but it requires talking about it with someone trained to help you process those experiences safely. I tried therapy, multiple therapists over the years. Did you tell any of them about the abuse? No, I told them about the insomnia, but I couldn't. Adrian, trauma therapy only works if you're able to discuss the trauma. If you're not ready to talk about it, therapy becomes just another place where you manage symptoms instead of addressing causes. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, with Adrian processing the possibility that his 15-year medical mystery might actually have a solution that didn't involve medication or sleep studies. Naomi, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you worked with other people who had experiences like mine? I've worked with several patients whose insomnia was connected to unprocessed trauma. Not all of them were childhood abuse survivors, but they all had the common experience of feeling unsafe when vulnerable. Did any of them get better? The ones who were willing to work with trauma specialists and process their experiences in a safe environment showed significant improvement. Some were able to sleep normally for the first time in years. And the ones who weren't willing, they continued managing symptoms instead of healing causes. Adrian absorbed this information with the analytical mind that had made him successful in business, but had never been applied to understanding his own psychological patterns. If I wanted to try real trauma therapy, where would I start? With finding a therapist who specializes in childhood trauma and has experience with PTSD treatment. Someone who understands that healing happens gradually and requires building safety before processing memories. You sound like you know a lot about trauma therapy. I do. I went through it myself after something that happened to me when I was younger. Adrian looked at Naomi with new understanding, recognizing that her ability to see his situation so clearly came from personal experience with healing from trauma. Did it help, the therapy? It saved my life. I was having panic attacks, nightmares, and couldn't maintain relationships because I didn't trust anyone. Trauma therapy taught me that what happened to me was real, that it wasn't my fault, and that I could learn to feel safe again. How long did it take? 2 years of consistent work. But Adrian, I started sleeping normally again after about 6 months of addressing the hypervigilance that was keeping me awake. For the first time in 15 years, Adrian felt something he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Would you help me find the right kind of therapist? I would be honored to help you take that step. And Naomi. Yes. Would you stay with me during this process, not as my nurse, but as someone who understands what it's like to carry secrets that are too heavy to hold alone? Naomi felt her professional boundaries shifting as she recognized that Adrian was asking for something beyond medical care. He was asking for human connection from someone who had survived similar darkness. Adrian, that would mean changing our professional relationship into something more personal. I know, and I understand if that's not something you're comfortable with. It's not about comfort. It's about whether we can maintain appropriate boundaries while you're healing from trauma. What if we established new boundaries? What if you weren't my nurse anymore, but you were someone who cared about my recovery as a friend? Naomi considered the ethical implications of transitioning from professional caregiver to personal support system, but she also recognized that Adrian's request came from a place of genuine need rather than inappropriate attachment. Let me think about it overnight. This is a big decision that affects both of us. Of course, I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not comfortable with. Adrian, can I ask you one more question tonight? Anything. When you think about sleeping normally again, what scares you most? Being vulnerable, losing control, not being able to protect myself if something bad happens. And what excites you most? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, considering a future he'd almost stopped believing was possible. Feeling rested, dreaming again, not being afraid of my own bedroom. Then we have something to work toward. As Naomi prepared to leave for the night, Adrian called after her with one final request. Naomi, would you stay just 5 more minutes? I know it sounds strange, but your presence makes me feel safer, maybe safe enough to close my eyes. Naomi settled back into her chair, understanding that this simple request represented the beginning of Adrian's healing journey, learning to trust that safety was possible even in moments of vulnerability. Close your eyes, Adrian. I'll stay right here until you fall asleep. For the first time in 15 years, Adrian allowed his eyes to close while another person was present, trusting that someone who understood his pain would keep him safe while he practiced the art of letting go. And for the first time in 15 years, he drifted into peaceful sleep that lasted for 4 uninterrupted hours. The healing was just beginning, but the foundation had been laid by a nurse who recognized that sometimes the most powerful medicine is the presence of someone who refuses to let you face your darkness alone. 3 weeks after that first peaceful sleep, Adrian found himself sitting in Dr. Sarah Thompson's trauma therapy office, with Naomi beside him as the emotional support she had agreed to provide during his healing journey. The transition from nurse-patient to friend-advocate had been carefully negotiated with clear boundaries, but their connection had deepened as Adrian began confronting 15 years of buried pain. Adrian, Dr. Thompson said gently, you've been coming here for 3 weeks, and we've established trust and safety protocols. Are you ready to begin discussing what happened when you were 12? Adrian's hands trembled slightly as he prepared to speak words he'd never said aloud. Naomi reached over and placed her hand on his arm, providing the grounding presence that had become essential to his sense of safety. It was my uncle, Adrian began, his voice barely above a whisper. My father's brother, David. He lived with us for 6 months while he was going through a divorce. Take your time, Dr. Thompson encouraged. You're in complete control of how much you share and when you share it. David was, everyone loved him. He was the fun uncle who took me to baseball games and taught me guitar. My parents trusted him completely with me. Adrian paused, gathering strength to continue a story that had shaped 23 years of his life. The first time it happened, I was confused. He said it was normal, that it was how men showed affection in our family. He said my father had done the same things with him when they were younger. Naomi felt her heart breaking as she listened to the manipulation tactics that had kept a 12-year-old silent about abuse. Dr. Thompson took notes while maintaining the calm, professional demeanor that created safety for trauma disclosure. How did you feel about what he was telling you? Dr. Thompson asked. Scared, confused, but also, I loved my uncle. He was important to me, and he said this was how we showed love. So I convinced myself it was normal even though it felt wrong. When did you realize it wasn't normal? When I got older and understood more about appropriate boundaries. But by then, it had been going on for 3 years, and I felt complicit because I hadn't stopped it earlier. Adrian, Dr. Thompson said firmly, children cannot be complicit in their own abuse. What happened to you was not your fault, and your confusion about appropriate boundaries was part of how David manipulated you. But I could have told someone, I could have stopped it. You were a child being manipulated by an adult who used your trust and love against you. The responsibility for stopping abuse lies with adults who are supposed to protect children, not with the children being abused. Adrian felt tears streaming down his face as he heard someone finally tell him that the guilt he'd carried for decades didn't belong to him. The reason I couldn't sleep, he continued, was because David came to my room at night. Sleep meant being vulnerable to someone who hurt me. Even after he moved out, I couldn't relax enough to sleep because my body remembered that bedtime meant danger. That's a completely normal trauma response, Dr. Thompson explained. Your nervous system developed hypervigilance to protect you from a real threat. The problem is that your body never learned the threat had ended. So my insomnia really is connected to what happened. Trauma-related insomnia is one of the most common long-term effects of childhood abuse. Your brain has been protecting you for 15 years, but now we need to teach it that you're safe. After the therapy session, Adrian and Naomi sat in his car, processing the magnitude of what he'd just shared for the first time. How do you feel? Naomi asked gently. Exhausted, relieved, terrified, like I just opened a door I've kept locked for 23 years. That's exactly what you did. And Adrian, I'm proud of you for finding the courage to walk through that door. I couldn't have done it without you there. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Over the following months, Adrian's therapy sessions gradually addressed the layers of trauma, shame, and self-blame that had accumulated over decades of silence. Dr. Thompson used EMDR therapy, cognitive behavioral techniques, and somatic approaches to help his nervous system learn that the danger had passed. More importantly, his relationship with sleep began to change. With Naomi's support, he developed new bedtime routines that created safety rather than anxiety. She would sit with him during the transition to sleep, providing the security his nervous system needed to relax into vulnerability. Tonight feels different, Adrian observed as they went through their evening routine 4 months into therapy. I'm tired, but it's normal tired, not exhausted tired. What's the difference? Exhausted tired felt like punishment, like my body was breaking down from staying awake when it needed rest. Normal tired feels like my body is ready for rest because it's earned it through a day of living. That's beautiful, Adrian. And I'm not afraid of closing my eyes anymore. I used to think that if I let myself sleep deeply, something bad would happen and I wouldn't be able to protect myself. What changed? I learned that staying awake didn't actually protect me from anything. The abuse happened whether I was vigilant or not, but sleep allows me to recover and be stronger for the next day. 6 months into trauma therapy, Adrian achieved something he hadn't experienced since childhood. A full 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, followed by natural awakening without alarm clocks or medication. Naomi, he said the next morning, his face radiant with a peace she'd never seen before, I slept through the night. How do you feel? Like a different person, like my brain is working properly for the first time in 15 years, like I remember what it means to feel rested. What was it like, the sleeping? I dreamed, good dreams, for the first time I can remember, dreams about the future instead of nightmares about the past. What kind of future did you dream about? Adrian hesitated, then decided to share the truth that had been growing in his heart throughout their months together. I dreamed about a life where I wasn't just healing from trauma, but building something beautiful with someone who understood both my pain and my hope. Adrian, I know we agreed to maintain boundaries during my healing process, but Naomi, what we have between us isn't just friendship or professional support. What is it? It's love. I'm in love with you, not because you helped me sleep, but because you saw me at my most broken and believed I could heal. Naomi felt her own carefully maintained boundaries dissolving as she acknowledged feelings she'd been suppressing for months. I love you too, she admitted. But Adrian, you're still in therapy, still processing trauma. I don't want to complicate your healing by adding romantic relationship dynamics. What if our relationship isn't a complication, but part of the healing? What if learning to love and be loved is how I prove to myself that I'm truly safe? What do you mean? I mean that loving you requires vulnerability, trust, and the belief that intimacy can be safe and beautiful instead of dangerous and shameful. Dr. Thompson, when consulted about the relationship development, provided professional guidance about healthy timing for trauma survivors entering romantic relationships. Adrian has made remarkable progress, she told them during a couples session she'd agreed to facilitate. His trauma symptoms have decreased significantly, his sleep patterns have normalized, and he's developed healthy coping mechanisms for managing triggering situations. So you think a romantic relationship is appropriate now? Naomi asked. I think Adrian has reached a point where he can engage in healthy romantic relationships without using them to avoid trauma work. The question is whether you both understand the ongoing nature of trauma recovery. What does that mean practically? Adrian asked. It means that trauma recovery isn't a destination, it's an ongoing journey. There will be difficult days, triggering situations, and moments when past trauma affects present relationships. And if we are prepared for that, then love can be one of the most powerful tools for continued healing, as long as both partners are committed to supporting each other's growth. 8 months after their first conversation about Adrian's sleepless nights, he and Naomi stood in the garden of his mansion, which had been transformed from a place of isolation into a home filled with love, laughter, and the peace that comes from facing darkness and choosing light. Adrian, Naomi said, as they watched the sunset together, do you ever miss the person you were before therapy? Never. That person was surviving, not living. He was managing symptoms instead of experiencing joy. And now I sleep peacefully beside the woman I love. Now I dream about our future together. Now I understand that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds. What do you want our future to look like? I want us to help other people find the healing we found. I want to fund trauma therapy programs for people who can't afford treatment. I want our love story to prove that broken people can become whole when they find someone who refuses to give up on them. Is that a proposal? Adrian smiled, pulling out a ring he'd been carrying for weeks while waiting for the right moment. Naomi Williams, will you marry me? Not because you fixed my sleep problem, but because you loved me through my healing and helped me discover that the most beautiful dreams are the ones we build together while we're awake. Yes, she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes to everything. As Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, both of them understood that their love story had been built on something more solid than attraction or convenience. It had been built on the courage to face trauma together and the faith that healing creates space for love to flourish. That night, as they fell asleep together for the first time as an engaged couple, Adrian experienced something he'd never thought possible: complete peace in vulnerability, total trust in safety, and the deep, restorative sleep that comes from knowing you're loved exactly as you are. The 15-year battle with insomnia was over, won not just through therapy and medication, but through the love of someone who understood that healing happens best when shared with another person brave enough to believe in second chances. Their wedding 6 months later was held at sunset in the same garden where he'd proposed, surrounded by other trauma survivors whose healing journeys had been supported by the foundation Adrian had established to ensure that no one else would have to carry their pain alone for 15 years. As they exchanged vows that promised to support each other through continued healing, growth, and whatever challenges life might bring, both Adrian and Naomi knew that their love story had become proof that the deepest wounds can become the foundation for the most beautiful healing when love and professional support work together.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.